I'm 71 years old, and to be honest, every time my phone rings, something inside me still tightens. Not because I don't understand technology, but because after that one phone call 40 years ago, every ringtone sounds to me like it might be bad news. Back then I was 31. I had a son, a mortgage, and a job where I was desperately trying to prove I was worth something. I'd come home so drained I could fall asleep on the couch in my work clothes. If you had asked me then, what matters most to you? I would have said, without thinking, my family. And I would have believed I was telling the truth. My dad and I didn't have a perfect relationship, but it was real. He was from that generation that didn't say, "I love you" out loud. But he was at your door at 6 in the morning on a weekend if you needed help moving, fixing a sink, or jump-starting your car in the winter. When I was a kid, he taught me to ride a bike in an empty school parking lot. Every time I fell, got mad, and wanted to quit, he'd say the same thing. "It's okay, son. The only thing that matters is that you're not afraid to get back up." I thought he was just talking about the bike. Now I know he was trying to teach me how to live. That evening, I was in the office long after everyone else had gone home. Cold coffee on the desk, a stack of paperwork beside it, and one thought running circles in my head. If I don't finish all this, they'll pass me over, and all these years will have been for nothing. The phone on my desk rang. I looked at it and let out a long sigh. I knew it was my father. I could practically see the conversation in my head, how his day went, what his blood pressure was like, when we were bringing his grandson over. I didn't have the energy or the patience for any of it. I picked up the receiver and said, "Dad, can't talk, slammed at work. I'll call you tomorrow." And I hung up. Tomorrow never came. The next morning, another call woke me up. It was my mom's number, but instead of her voice, I heard a stranger's, trained, flat, professional. "Your father." After that, I only remember fragments. Heart attack. It was very quick. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, phone in my hand, remembering those words from the night before. "I'll call you tomorrow." Those 4 words turned into a scar I still feel every time my phone rings. When I got to my mother's house, she was sitting on a chair by the telephone. She looked up at me and quietly asked, "He was so excited for you to come by. Why were you always so busy?" I didn't have an answer. How do you explain to a woman who just lost her husband that her son decided a report was more important than talking to his dad? That day was the first time I really felt what emptiness is. On paper, nothing had changed. Same house, same table, same curtains on the windows. Just one armchair in the living room suddenly didn't belong anymore. But the air in that house was different. It was like someone had turned off the background noise, and the silence became too heavy. At the funeral, one of my dad's old friends came up to me. He patted me on the shoulder and said, "You know, he was really proud of you. He talked about you all the time, about your job, about his grandson. He was hoping you two would go fishing together this summer." I just nodded. Inside, everything twisted into a tight little knot. I hadn't planned any fishing trip. My calendar was full of team meeting, report due, client presentation. Under Dad, I just had a vague mental note. Need to stop by sometime. Sometime. Later. When things calmed down. After the funeral, I barely touched my phone for several days. Mom tried calling, friends, co-workers. I just listened to the ringing and wait for it to stop. One time, the ringtone suddenly blared louder than usual. I dropped the phone, and my hand instinctively moved to hit decline, exactly like that night. And I caught myself thinking something ridiculous. What if it's someone else calling to tell me somebody died? That's the cruel thing about death. It doesn't check in with you first. It doesn't ask, did you say everything? Did you have enough time? It just puts a period at the end of the sentence, and you spend the rest of your life rereading that sentence in your head, trying to add a few more words, but only up here. A couple of months later, I was going through some papers in my mom's kitchen and found a page torn from a notepad. My dad's messy handwriting. Ask my son when they can get out to the cottage. Maybe June? Show the boy how to fish. I sat down and stared at that piece of paper for a good 5 minutes. We never talked about it. He never even had the chance to ask. He was planning a summer he didn't live to see.
Years went by. I changed jobs, then changed again. We moved. My son grew up and moved to another city. On the surface, life went on. But from that moment on, every call felt different. It didn't start with, "Who's that?" It started with, "What happened?" One evening, I was sitting on the couch, phone in one hand, laptop in the other. My son called. This was years ago, before he was married, back when he was still just dating his future wife. I was exhausted, my head was buzzing, my inbox was overflowing. He started talking about what, at that moment, sounded like nonsense. Work, friends, some girl. I listened and nodded, but part of me was already drifting back to the emails. And then I caught myself wanting to say, "Hey, can we talk tomorrow?" It hit me like a bolt of lightning. I was standing at the exact same crossroads as all those years ago. Same choice, be here now or I'll call you tomorrow. I remembered that morning call from my mom. I remembered staring at the phone back then, haunted by that silence. I remembered how every ringtone since then felt like bad news. And I just closed the laptop and said to my son, "Go on, I'm listening." We ended up talking for over an hour. Nothing epic, just normal things, normal stories. He asked my advice, complained, joked. At some point I realized I was just sitting there listening to his voice and thinking, this is exactly what I will never have with my father again. Ever. Later, there was another small moment that stuck with me. I was standing in line at the store, and a man in his 50s was talking on the phone next to me. "Yeah, Dad, I'm fine. Yeah, I'll come by. Yeah, I love you too." That one word, Dad, hit me harder than any lecture. I stood there with a carton of milk and a loaf of bread in my hands and envied a stranger who could just say that, out loud, right now, without later. That's the trap with these last call stories. You can be a decent person, a loving son, a caring parent, a loyal friend. But one tiny, reasonable phrase like, "not right now," can turn into the moment you replay in your head for the rest of your life. For a long time, I tried to justify myself. I didn't know. Work was important. It wouldn't have changed anything anyway. Those lines work for a couple of years. Then they stop. And what's left is a simple, ugly truth. I could have picked up. I could have talked. I could have said, "Hey, Dad, how are you?" And I didn't. Eventually, I got tired of lying to myself. I sat down and wrote out everything I regret about how I treated my father. I assumed he'd always be around and treated time with him like it was unlimited. I was embarrassed to be vulnerable around him, so instead of real conversations, we just traded small talk. I saw his calls as interruptions rather than what they really were. An old man's way of saying, "I still want to be part of your life, even though you're grown." When you're young, your parents feel like part of the scenery. They're just there, in their house, with their routines. And you're in the center of the story. Everything revolves around your plans, your career, your relationships. Then, one day, you go back to that same house and the scenery is gone. And the stage you're standing on suddenly feels way too big and way too empty. With time, my fear of phone calls turned into something else as well. A strange kind of gratitude. These days, whenever my family calls, my wife, my son, my grandkids, the first thought that pops into my head is, they're alive, they're here, I still have a chance to show up. And most of the time, I answer, even if it's inconvenient. Not because I turned into some perfect human being, but because I know exactly what it feels like when you run out of chances. People sometimes say to me, "You're overreacting. Everyone misses a call now and then. It happens." It happens is when you call back later, when there is a next time. The problem is, at some point, there isn't. And you never know which call is going to be the last one. If you're expecting some deep, complicated philosophy from an old man, you're going to be disappointed. It's much simpler than that. So simple that, when you're 20, it sounds like a cliché. Here's what that one missed call taught me. If you can pick up, pick up. If you can say, "I love you," say it. If you can drop by for a 20-minute visit, go. Don't postpone real contact with the people you love just because you're not in the mood or it's not a good time. Your mood will pass. The awkwardness will fade. But that moment may never come back.
If someone offered me the chance to relive one day of my life, I wouldn't choose the day I got a promotion or bought a car. I'd choose that ordinary evening in the office. The one with the cold coffee, the stupid reports, my tired head, and an incoming call from my dad. In that version, I'd pick up that heavy desk phone and say, "Hey, Dad. Hi. What's up?" Maybe we'd only talk for 5 minutes about nothing. Maybe he'd complain about his blood pressure again. Maybe he'd ask if we could come over that weekend. It wouldn't change the world, but it would change my memories. But that version of my life doesn't exist. I only have this one. The one with the missed call, the dead line on the other end, and the words that never turned into a conversation. I'll call you tomorrow. So if my story is good for anything, let it be a small reminder, not to scare you, but to give you a choice. At any moment, you can do something a little differently than I did. And if, after hearing this, you pick up your phone and send just one message, "Hey, How are you? To someone you've been putting off for later. Then all these 40 years I've lived with this pain won't have been completely wasted.